Welcome to a very exciting video today, folks. Here is going to be the start of something new. For most of my life, I've been obsessed with Baldur's Gate. It has been a franchise near and dear to my heart, and ever since starting YouTube, I wanted to do a proper playthrough of the series. Of course, the popularity of Baldur's Gate 3 has now sparked even more interest in the series for others, and for good reason. Baldur's Gate 3 is a modern masterpiece. I myself have played through multiple campaigns already, and I'm excited to play it again with you all. But before that, we are going to go back to the original games, which were masterpieces in their own right for the time. I'm certainly no master at the game, but I do know a lot about it, from the characters, world building, and little secrets. I know a lot of people are curious about the events of Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and how that leads to 3, and that's exactly the kind of playthrough I hope to offer anyone interested. The games are old, and particularly the Dungeons & Dragons rule set it uses can be a lot for some players who aren't wanting to commit to learning it just to play an old game. Now, I do want to encourage people to still play the game for yourselves if you're interested. The game even has multiple difficulties to choose from to make your playing experience as easy or challenging as you want it to be. And I plan to go into a good chunk of the game mechanics for those interested. So, whether you just want to get the story, hang out, or maybe learn a thing or two, my streams will be a cool place to be. And yes, I'm going to be streaming my adventure. More on when and where that'll be at the end of the video, or you can check the description if you're just too excited. Okay, so, with all that said, what's the deal with Baldur's Gate 1? What am I drawing here, and why? If you're familiar with Baldur's Gate 3 and its lore, you'll know that the events of 1 take place about 100 years in the past. If you don't know Baldur's Gate 3, that's fine too. You'll get to experience the whole package in order. Just like in Baldur's Gate 3 though, you do get to start off the game by creating your character. So, I would like you all to meet my boy, Voss. A scruffy young 20-something, Voss is a bit of a scallywag and troublemaker. He's definitely gotten in trouble with local law enforcement more times than one, but he is generally a good heart and doesn't like to see the little guy get picked on. He doesn't feel bad nicking treasures that catch his eye, and he's been known to backtalk authority on occasion. Especially those who are assholes and call him by his dead name and old pronouns. Voss is transmask, just like me, for real. From a young age, Voss has been training as a swashbuckler and hopes to one day be a legendary dual-wielding swordsman. Going on many adventures, traveling the world, and taking down bullies who put down others, just like he's read about in all those books in the Great Library. Now, as much as Voss's spirit longs to be out adventuring, he has spent his whole young life locked behind the walls of Candlekeep, a small fortress town south on the Sword Coast from Baldur's Gate. His foster father, Gorion, was once a great adventurer himself, his powerful magic a clear sign of his adventuring days. But he seems to have settled down inside of Candlekeep to give Voss a safe environment to grow up. Voss admires his foster father, but he can't say that life in Candlekeep has been all that exciting. Most of the town's residents are stuffy old sages and monks, shuffling about the library and none too interested in entertaining a child. Voss had no one his age other than the occasional traveler until Winthrop, the town's innkeeper, adopted his own orphan to foster, Imowen, a girl just a bit younger than Voss himself, and the two have become fast best friends. Voss and Imowen caused a lot of mayhem in Candlekeep during their teenage years. Gorion always tried to encourage Voss down the virtuous path, but after Imowen arrived, the two rapscallions were impossible to make behave. Gorion can see the good in Voss's and Imowen's partnership though. Even when they pull their pranks, they do bring out the better parts of each other. As they have become adults, Voss is getting more antsy. He's tired of being treated like a child. But the monks never take him for anything but Gorion's annoying foster child. Imowen is more childlike by nature, and Voss can't help but resent how that perception rubs off on how the rest of the town sees him. He just can't stay trapped here much longer. Adventure is calling. And there's Voss, I'll be doing my best to roleplay him as I've described him. For the more nitty-gritty details, he is a chaotic good human thief with the class kit of Swashbuckler, a subclass that makes him a bit more fighter adjacent, with the downside that I don't get any backstabbing multiplier if I hit enemies from behind while being invisible. I've never been very good at remembering backstabbing damage anyway. I know that's terrible, backstab damage is really good, but this won't be much of a loss for me personally. I did happen to roll a very high stat total without much fuss, which is awesome. I have no shame in power gaming a bit because Baldur's Gate is hard and the computer is a ruthless dungeon master. I have a pretty specific direction I'd like to take this character, so I had to make sure to set myself up to take them down that path. I also have a twitchy finger for the quick save button, and I will not be apologizing for it. With any luck, we will never lose more than a few minutes of progress with the way I religiously save my game. So that's my character out of the way. What about the rest of the party? Baldur's Gate 1 allows you to have 6 party members. That is you and 5 companions. Now, the original Baldur's Gate has right around 30 different adventurers that you could recruit to your party, and there's a good amount of variety there too. Anything you need to round out your party can likely be found, from mages to fighters, clerics, and rangers. You can also run into plenty of companions that multi-class, which gives you more options for the price of being a bit underleveled compared to single-classed companions. I will make sure to introduce and show off these characters as we run into them. Plenty will be along the story's path, but some of them you really have to go out of your way to find. Now, for the sake of this playthrough, we will ultimately be traveling with the Canon Party. This is the group that is later made to be the canon group that you adventure with by the time you reach Baldur's Gate 2, for story reasons. There's a lot of other great companions, and I certainly wouldn't say no to someday doing another playthrough with a different group, but I do personally love the Canon Party, and would be doing a disservice taking you through the games without bringing them along. Unlike Baldur's Gate 3, both Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 have a morality/reputation system. So who you party with matters, not just on a meta battle focus scale, but on a personality scale as well. Baldur's Gate uses the D&D alignment chart, and based on characters' alignments, this can affect how well your team works together. Good characters are not going to trust evil-aligned characters, and law-abiding characters are going to be upset with rule breakers, and vice versa. If you have a party with wildly different viewpoints, it can lead to literal fights breaking out on your team where you have to choose who lives and who dies. Or they might leave forever. We can avoid that by keeping with the canon party, who all generally align with my own character. And now I'll be introducing you to that party. I'll keep the details vague as to not to spoil the story overall though. First up is our childhood best friend, Imowen, a loud and plucky girl who is just a bit younger than ourselves. She was adopted by Winthrop, and the old innkeeper has her doing chores around the inn whenever she isn't hanging around with our character. Like us, Imowen is a thief, and her innocent, childlike demeanor keeps her out of trouble even when she is clearly guilty. Even though she's a pickpocket and requires stealth, Imowen always loved bright pinks and loud celebrations. You might not guess it, but Imowen is also quite studious. She finds lessons boring, but despite that, Imowen is a quick learner. Imowen has been by our side since she came to Candlekeep about 10 years ago, and our friendship has seen a lot together. At least, what can be experienced between teenagers stuck behind walls. Gorion often treats Imowen as a second child, but lately seems to be trying to distance you and himself from her, and you don't know why. Maybe he's cross with her for being caught snooping about in his room. Gorion had Winthrop punish her pretty harshly for that recently, and she's been left with a mountain of chores as a result. Imowen remains as bright and chipper as ever though, only complaining to you about her old puff-guts foster father, as she likes to call him. Imowen is a companion who is an exception to the rule. I mentioned earlier how some companions could fight each other or leave your party, but Emowyn is a companion that will stick with you as long as you want her around. She might complain about it, especially seeing as she is a neutral, good aligned character, but she'll never give up on you, which I think is just really sweet. Mechanically speaking, her stats are some of the best for an NPC. She has decent stats all around, and while she's not very strong, her thieving abilities will be vital in certain scenarios. You might be wondering why I'm running a party with 2 thieves. My reasoning will be clear as we go through the games, but you'll see the utility of having 2 thieves even in this game. Traps and locks are everywhere, and they will kill you. So I plan to split those responsibilities between Voss and Emowyn, with Emowyn being the more stealthy trap finder, and Voss being more of the lock and pocket picking type. Next we have the husband and wife duo of Khalid and Jaheira. These two subvert expectations in regards to their class and personality. Khalid is a fighter class, our tank to run into battles head first and take blows that our more squishy characters cannot. Khalid is also, however, a bit of a coward. And I say that affectionately. Of most companions that you can have in Baldur's Gate, Khalid is the one that is most likely to be struck with fear and literally run away from battle if he does not like our odds, screaming and crying for his wife all the way. I love this guy. He's a definition of wife guy, and I love how he's a fighter even though it's very frightening to him. Some might find that annoying, but I think it just adds to his character and makes for a very different kind of warrior class than you usually see in these settings. Now, for Khalid's art, I mostly went off of my own headcanon for his looks. I think a few canon materials, he is more so described as like a big guy with a strong chin and blonde hair, but I just don't see him that way. And there's really not that much to go off of for a canon description. Plus, his portrait in-game doesn't give us a ton to work with either. So I just kind of followed my heart on this one. I know that the red in his portrait is likely just the top frilly bit of his helmet, but I can't imagine Khalid without red hair. So I made him a bit of a strawberry blonde as a compromise, with long wavy locks. 'Cause I think Jaheira would like them. Next up is the boss herself, Jaheira. Some of you who are fans of Baldur's Gate 3 might already be acquainted with a much older version of her, but now you get to see her in her prime. Wife to Khalid, she is often called bossy and brash. Her demeanor can come off quite cold, and she is almost always serious and sarcastic. She keeps a lot of walls up and only seems to soften a bit once you get to know her. She often expresses exasperation with Khalid, but it's clear the two of them love each other a lot. She can be harsh, but it's often coming from a well-meaning place. Together, Jaheira and Khalid look into local troubles around the region. They were close friends of Gorion, our foster father, and even agreed to look after us should anything happen to him. Since we're an adult now, that hardly matters, but it does speak to their character that Gorion would trust them so thoroughly. Jaheira is a multi-classed fighter/druid. This makes her a decent fighter as well as spellcaster. Her druid spells are great for party support and healing, and her levels as a fighter means that she can wear good armor without any downsides. Now, her choice in weapons will be a bit limited. Since she is a druid, she can't wield weapons made of metal, which leaves her with a lot less options. But the trade-off is still overall worth taking. Another interesting thing about Baldur's Gate is that some companions come as a pair, meaning that you can't have one without the other. If you were to try to dismiss either Khalid or Jaheira from your party, both would leave. There are ways to get around this, but they certainly don't feel great. Most companions you run across will just be out on their own, but it's good to keep in mind that every companion is different and will have different quirks. However, that being said, our last two companions are also a bonded pair, Dynahair and her faithful bodyguard, Minsc. And boo. Minsc and Dynahair are travelers from the faraway country of Rashomon, and are journeying together in a rite of passage in their culture called a Degema. Witches, or Wicklaren, as they are called like Dynahair, must travel the world in pursuit of knowledge to bring back home and prove themselves. They are assigned a bodyguard for this mission, who is also trying to prove themselves worthy of becoming warriors in their society by protecting their witch on her journey and seeing her home when the time is right. It's a very serious and perilous journey, and both parties must cooperate and keep each other safe in order to succeed. Minsk is dedicated fully to his mission, and he means well, but it's safe to say that Minsk has probably taken one too many blows to the head. Or maybe he's just always been a bit more enthusiastic than he is intelligent. Minsk is a berserker ranger. Yes, you heard that right. And he tends to run headfirst into battle, swinging his sword and shouting at the top of his lungs about destroying evil and all who would do evil. At his side is his faithful animal companion, the hamster Boo, or, as Minsk believes, a miniature giant space hamster. But Boo just looks to be an ordinary rodent, albeit with bright, intelligent eyes for a creature so small and fuzzy. If Minsk is protective of his Wicklaren, Dynahair, that is nothing compared to his devotion to Boo, who he protects by promptly thrashing anyone who so much as looks at Boo funny. We'll often find Minsk talking with his animal companion, as rangers do, but the warrior seems to get a fair share of wisdom by talking to Boo, who seems to help him when things get too complicated for Minsk to wrap his head around. And finally, we have Dynahair, the Witch of Rashomon, which means that she is a specialized class of mage called Invoker. This gives her a bonus to casting spells of her class type, and an extra spell per level, but is cut off from using enchantment spells, which, not gonna lie, kinda hurts. Enchantment class spells have some really good crowd control, but Dynahair is still a strong party member regardless. Dynahair is mysterious and highly intelligent. She speaks in a lofty manner and may come off as a bit snobbish, but Dynahair all around is a very noble and good companion, as well as a kind and caring soul. Since she is a Wicklaren, she has to be careful not to cross paths with any wizards of Thay. Red-robed wizards are sworn enemies to the Wicklaren of Rashomon, and they will not hesitate to kill each other. Dynahair's group is aligned lawful good, while Thayan wizards are mostly lawful evil, so there is great conflict of interests between their groups. Dynahair gets exasperated with Minsk and his antics, but she is as duty-bound to him as he is to her, and neither take that duty lightly. Dynahair hopes to not only complete their Dejima, but to do good in the world. While her and Minsk might go about things in different ways, both are very committed to righting the wrongs of the world and seeing justice used against evil. And that's the whole party! It was so fun to do these portraits, and as one final surprise for the video, I plan to use these portraits in the game during our playthrough. One of the cool features about Baldur's Gate, since it came out in 1998, was that you could import your own custom portraits to use in the game. So I thought it would be cool to show that feature off. Also, I'd like to add that I will be playing the game with just a couple of mods added to help spruce up the experience. Vanilla Baldur's Gate is a great time by itself, don't get me wrong, and if you are going to play the game, I suggest keeping it unmodded. But there are a couple of mods that I'll be using, and I do recommend if that's up your alley. First and foremost, I'm going to be using the NPC project for Baldur's Gate 1. I've used it before in the past, and I really love the content added in this mod. It mostly just gives our companions some more dialogue with each other and helps flesh them out a bit more, especially in a way that will endear you more to them as characters, as without this mod, the companions can be pretty silent, particularly during heavy story moments, which can make the characters seem not so involved in what is going on. Highly recommended mod. Next, I have a mod called Classic Movies. This will substitute the original game cutscenes over the enhanced edition ones. I understand what Beamdog was hoping to do with the new cutscenes, but they just don't have the same weight to them as the old cutscenes, even with the CGI being over 25 years old. And I feel like those classic cinematics really help add to the tone and mood of the game. Plus, there's just a lot of them that are completely left out, which can drastically change the mood of entering a new area. Another recommended mod, but you can also look up the cutscenes on YouTube if you couldn't be bothered. Unfinished Business is the last main mod I've downloaded. I am admittedly a little less familiar with this mod, but apparently it adds some of the content that was originally planned for the game but was cut. From my understanding, this will mostly affect a couple of story beats and side quests in the later half of the game. Just a couple of tweaks, really. We'll have to see how much I recommend this one by the end. With that being said, that's everything that I need to say about setting this up. Now, just to tell you when I plan on streaming and we can get started on this grand adventure. Currently, I plan to stream 3 days of the week, Monday, Thursday, and Saturday. I put a schedule up on Twitch that you can check. Now, if I planned and uploaded this video at the right time, I should just about be ready to go live in a few minutes. Join me over on my Twitch channel where we'll be playing, and if you follow me, you'll have the options to turn on notifications when I go live in the future. See you there. Tell me some of your favorite Baldur's Gate or D&D memories, and stay inspired.